Hi, Adam Kirkwood here with Canadian Hobbies and KXRD, Kirkwood Experimental Racing Development. This is the second part going towards building the mid-motor conversion on the stock chassis. If you watched the first video, it showed how we disassembled the back end, and this is carrying off from that video. One thing to note I forgot to do in the first video is just remove this little spacer. We do not need it. It's on the bottom of the transmission. So to do our mid-motor conversion, a lot of it has to do with this particular plate here. This plate does a couple things. One, it strengthens the rear end because of how thin this is. I've had experience where I twisted it and bent it. Another thing that it does is it allows us to have our mid-motor conversion, and it extends our chassis so that our wheelbase remains the same. People who've done a mid-motor conversion, they end up having a shorter wheelbase because of how the arms go forward in a gull-wing manner. This corrects that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take our transmission. We are going to screw on our shock tower. All right, we are going to line our transmission into the riser. So it fits into a little keyway groove. We're going to grab two button head screws, M3 button head screws from the car. Kind of the shorter ones are like a M8 or M10 in length. Feed it through. There's two big openings here. You're going to feed the screw head through there. It just fits. And you're going to screw it right into the transmission until it's snug. And that's just provide extra bracing for the front of the car. We're doing the other side. So we're just feeding in that screw to a bottoms out. Feels good. Alright, next up we're going to take our plate and we're going to screw on using probably their M8 or M10. They're just like the most of the countersinks that you pulled off the chassis. We're going to use those screws to mount the plate to the riser. Oh, my bad. Before putting that on, you want to put our spacer. If you're not using the wheelie bar, then you use a spacer. It just keeps the ride height and everything the same. So if you were using the wheelie bar, you would not be using the spacer. And the wheelie bar is available as a standalone kit that you can order alongside with any of the conversions. It will work with the rear motor conversion, this mid-motor conversion, and the full kit mid-motor conversion. Hold. Alright, so you now got those all screwed in. We're going to take our front brace. We're going to slide it in, push. So we slid it in through this opening. We're going to push up now. So now we cause a gap. We're going to take our little riser plate, slide it underneath there. And then we're going to use two 25mm countersunk screws. I'm just going to write this down. So with using two 25mm countersunk screws, you're going to slide it through. That's one side. Repeat on the other side. gander at all this. Oh, oops. So I have put these screws in here. That's not the case. We do not want to put those in as of yet. I apologize for that. So we will not be using those screws. What we can do now is take our 30mm screws and install the shock tower. It's not happening. My rear end got kicked up. Probably what I'm going to do, I just backed off the front, get the shock tower installed. And then turn up the front. So I loosened up the fronts. So I loosened up the front too so I can get the back in there. I apologize for that. I have to just do small little adjustments and that'll take care of all that. So that's all together right now. We are going to go ahead and install our arms. So our arms are actually going to be flipped going facing forward. So now our arms are forward, and then we're going to take our rear spacer, or our pivot block, line that up. Now, there is up to 3 of these spacers, and right now, if you put no spacer in there, it sets it up how it initially was with the chassis, and it has anti-squat, so it's going to make it less likely to move the weight to the rear. If you put in 1 spacer, then it makes it neutral. So it's in each, whatever. And if you put another spacer in there, then you have positive anti-squat, and it encourages weight transfer to the rear. Right now, I'm just going to build this as neutral. And so for the 2 screws we're going to need, I apologize. Where's my case of screws? Going to need 2 more 30mm screws and 2 nylon locking nuts. I'm going to insert this to the back. Hex driver. Alright, so that's getting close to the rear end being built. Alright. So the next thing we are going to do is we're going to take our rear end and we're going to actually disassemble the wheelie bar off of this. All we care about actually really is just this particular bracket. We don't need this right now. So with that, we're going to insert that back into place. So grab our screws. So we got our long countersunk screw. I'm going to fire that. That's all the way through. We're going to grab our two relatively long screws to go back into here. All right. So what I'm going to do is actually modify that. I made this narrow because it would actually sit in between here. But we actually don't need the motor guard. And so I need to just make this wider so it fits into this groove. But I'll show you what's happening with it. So you have that inserted there. That nut on. So now you actually would have, when you tighten that down, or this will be made wider, that's a fan mount for to cool your motor down and your ESC if you have it there. So you can have it kind of pointed at both your motor and ESC and cool it down. So there's a fan mount on the unit as well. We're going to take our floating body mount using our 20mm screws. Now, before you put these two screws in, because you no longer have that casing going on in there, this used to slide in there. It's in the way because it's screwed. But this tab used to slide in there. But since we're not using that, there's a little insert that gets, well inserted in there to take up that void. And then you can put your other two screws back in there. Which now allows you to tie all that together. So that's all bound together, much more reinforced. So now what we're going to do is, these hubs are kind of really far forward. So we're going to actually flip them around so that the hubs are kind of protruding back. So you take out these screws here. Push the pins out. Swap these around. Alright, now what we're going to do though, we're going to take these two ball studs, we will move them inward. And grab the ball studs from the kit, put them on the back side on the outer hole. Now if we grab our tie rod, snap the one, put the axle in, snap the rear, our tie rod is relatively straight now. So our tie rods are pretty straight, which is great. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on the floating body mount. So we're going to press in our bearings. Make sure they're fully seated into the arms. Alright, so we got that. We'll grab our body post mounts and our 8x6mm M3 screws. Screw them in. Oh, darn it. those are in. We can grab our body posts and the screws to mount the body post. Slide them into your desired length. And then once you got the body post in, we're going to line up to the floating body mount just to make sure, or figure out our orientation. Got the back end. We're going to have these spun probably backwards, I suppose. I think I'm going to have them actually facing forward so that it's more directed straight over top of the wheels. So as we take our arms with the bearings, we're going to take an M3 12mm screw, 1/2 mm washer or shim, feed that through, feed it through the bracket, grab an M3 nut, so I put that on. Turn that down, make sure it swivels, and we'll repeat to the other side. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead, take our screw, feed that through, because we're going to be going, actually got to go the other way, so because it's going to sit like this. So screw, bearing, 2mm washer, 2mm washer. I'm going to feed that through. Don't get drop both washers. So feed that through. Bearing, washer, 0.5mm washer, our floating mount, and then follow up with the nut. Snug it up. Make sure it moves. It gets a little too bound. So I'm just going to back it loose a little. Back it loose a little bit more. There we go. So now that's moving really easily. So now we're going to snap on our links. Links are snapped. Moves great. I did kind of forget to put this on, so hopefully I can put it on without having to take the link off. If not, I gotta pop the link off. Not too bad. So, got a little cap looking thing. First ring, spur, second plate, our spring tensioner, put our nut on. Let's take it down good. Grab our cover. Pop the cover on, grab our 2 small screws, wherever they may be. Those must be them. Fire one screwed up top. Do the same on the bottom. There we go. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and mount our shocks. But you're going to mount the shocks before this bracket would make things easier. I like to make myself struggle. Now, supplied in the kits are little C clips that go in outside on your shock shaft to limit your bottom out travel. And there's also plastic washers, which you're going to use a plastic washer, which I don't think I have handy. Okay, so this is your like one of your parts tree. It'll be full, of course, which will have these little washers. And you can grab 2mm ones, the biggest ones on the tree. You're gonna snip off 2. You can grab your screws to mount your shocks. Your shock, a 2mm spacer. And then it's going to feed into whatever hole you want to for your shock. I'm going the outer holes for right now. So that's that one side. Do the same on the other side. So the reason why I'm putting that spacer on there is then it helps to keep the spring out of your tie rods. Again, these shocks have such limiters in there, have like no travel whatsoever, but you can now remove all that and have the full suspension travel, and then you can adjust it accordingly. What I forgot to put in there is this little brass weight. There's an opening, you can slide that brass weight in there. So there's a kind of mistake I have done there. If I were to remove these 4 screws, or sorry, 6 screws. There's that. No. But I remove all those 6 ones. I can open the plate, fire that back in there, and be golden. I just don't want to do that because I have to redo that, and I'm being too lazy. So anyways, we got 2 M3 10mm long screws, and that's going to let us be fired into the slider here. So that allows for rear droop. So now with those set screws, we have rear droop adjustment, or setup. So now we're going to take this Finally, we did all that work. Now we're back to here. So this is why I took those 4 screws out initially, because they're actually going to use a longer screw into those pocket voids. So we're going to go ahead and grab our 4 shortest countersunk screws that we have, because we really don't need to be longer. We're actually going to need 6. And we're just going to go ahead and line them up. Let's just have them loose, get all the screws started. Again, because you're going to metal on metal, you want Loctite on these screws. And right now I'm going to snug these all down now, because I got all 6 of these ones in. Alright. Then using the 2 screws that came from the shock tower initially, hopefully I can use these to feed in, but they might be too long. No, they are perfect length. So with that being said, what length of screw are we dealing with here? So I'll probably want to pick up some longer screws. To do those, I only have the 2, but we'll put those 2 in there. Probably will actually replace all 4, just because those might have been a little too deep. I heard a little bit of cracking, so they might be too deep. But long story short, there is that. So we're just going to finish up with grabbing 4 more screws, countersunk. Grab our battery hold down brackets. Line that up to 2 holes. And that completes the mid-motor conversion on the stock chassis. So that takes care of that. Your battery can go about that far back, right up to the motor, all the way far forward. Mount your speaker controller and receiver wherever you need to. You pull these brackets off if you need to reduce some weight, because this is about 200 grams, those plastics. But that kind of acts as a stop and keys it. Run a strap across, have a forward running across. And that ends that.